I'm very much excited about our speaker tonight, Connie Malamed. Connie says she likes me because I can actually pronounce her name correctly. But I like Connie for a lot of different reasons. She's very down to earth. She's very practical. I think she kind of has the mindset that, you know, learning is never, you're never done. It's never over. And I know that's distressing for some people, including my youngest son, who, when I explained to him the other night that, well, when you get out of elementary school, there's middle school, and then there's high school. He goes, okay, great, so 12th grade, I'm done. I'm like, well, not really. He's like, what? There's more beyond that? So while that can be distressing for some people, it's also an opportunity. So that's why I'm so excited to have Connie here, because I think every time I interact with her, I learn something new. Connie consults, writes, speaks in the field of online learning, visual communication, and information design. She's the author of the book Visual Language for Designers and Instructional Design. She's also working on a new book that I'm not sure when the
next year.
Date, next year, okay. And the title of that book is, so I get it right, I had to write it out in longhand here, Visual Design Solutions, Principles and Creative Inspiration for Learning Professionals. So you can see a lot of different fields kind of commingling here. Connie also designed and developed the Instructional Design Guru mobile application, and she has a great website, phenomenal website called the E-Learning Coach. Has anyone ever visited the E-Learning Coach? A lot of good stuff. Oh, Connie, you have fans.
I thought it was only my mom.
Okay. So Connie has a lot of fans out there, and of course the E-Learning Coach talks about trends and technologies in the world of learning and development. Connie is a frequent presenter at conferences, and she's fairly local. So Connie, please come.
It is so good to be here tonight and to see all of you. I'm pretty excited. I thought I would start by making a public admission. I'm going to tell you something that I haven't told anyone else, so please don't tell anyone. I'm terrified of my cat, Patches. It's not that I think Patches is going to attack me in the middle of the night, but I'm terrified of giving cats medicine, because every time I do it, my arms and hands get completely scratched up, and I've had about 5 cats in my life. So when I was recently at the vet and she told me Patches was going to need some liquid medication for the rest of her life and give it to her twice a day, I felt bad for the cat, but I also felt bad for myself. She swore to me that it would taste good. Really? Did she taste it? So anyway, of course, the expensive medication comes. It's delivered in the mail. I put it in Patches' food. Of course, as you would expect, she doesn't eat it. Anyone who has cats knows that. So my husband and I are conferring. We're saying, okay, you get the armor. Let's see. I'll hold her by her tail. You hold her by her head. You know, we're trying to figure all these things out. And then suddenly I realized, what about YouTube? Maybe somebody made a video about how to give a cat liquid medication. So I went to my computer and I went to YouTube, and there were close to 5,000 videos explaining how to do this. There were videos by veterinarians. There were videos by those smug vet techs who can do anything to an animal. But there were also some videos by some regular people. And those are the ones that I really liked the best, because they were like me. They didn't have any training. And the one I liked the best was by someone that I call Pajama Guy. I don't know why you would get up and make a video on YouTube and not get dressed, but whatever. His video was great, and he even had some text explanations. The other thing I couldn't figure out was why he put the quilt over his table, but we don't have to worry about that. He made a great video. He tells you how to get the cat, how to put it in its mouth. So I watched the video, and I went to Patches, and I put it in her mouth, and I missed it, got all over her fur. Okay, that was try number 1. Next time, I watched the video again, and I got about half of it in her mouth. By the 3rd try, I don't want to brag, but I was awesome. I was completely competent, and I could probably come to your house now and give your cat liquid medication.
What day?
The amazing thing is that within 1 minute, I had access to nearly 5,000 videos to learn something that had eluded me my entire life. How many people here have learned anything from YouTube? Raise your hand. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. What's that?
From a 6-year-old.
From a 6-year-old. What was it that you were learning, Joe? Okay, you don't have to say.
How to create an animation and edge animate.
Oh my gosh, from a 6-year-old. Anybody else want to say what they learned from YouTube?
How to make dumplings.
Okay, that sounds like a good one. Anyone else? Yeah.
How to get the top off my new Jeep Wrangler.
How to get the top off your new Jeep Wrangler. It really is amazing. And because we are learning things from YouTube, that means that if you work in a training department in an organization, they're all learning things from YouTube too. And this fact, the fact that our information landscape has completely changed, our virtual landscape of information, has big ramifications for the future of learning professionals. Because now we're in such an evolution that it doesn't even matter what screen you're on. Technology has evolved so you could be on your phone, on your tablet, on your PC, on your desktop, on your laptop, even on your television screen. It doesn't even matter anymore, it's just the screen. And the operating systems are getting so sophisticated that they're going to start being able to synchronize everything. I mean, already now you can start a Netflix video on your tablet and finish it up on your television set. It's amazing. But this is going to have a big impact on our future roles, I think, and all the pundits seem to think so too. I think that even though we're going to talk a lot about technology today, that we should always remember, or the effects of technology, that we should always remember that it's really about people. How can we do things in a smarter way? How can we help people be more efficient? How can we help people and the organizations that they work for and the planet that we live on have a better quality of life? That's what technology is really about. But there's no question that technology is a trigger and it has ramifications that ripple through our world and the future of learning professionals. So let's take a step back and look at some of the drivers that are affecting why the world is changing so much. You have to admit that there's a certain convergence. There's a coming together. It's kind of like the perfect storm. All these changes in technology, these cultural shifts in the workplace, and really, finally, the research in the world of training that has been around for so long is finally coming to a head, probably because people are reading blogs on the internet. So one of the most prominent, overwhelming things is the speed of change. How many people are feeling like things are just getting faster and faster and change just keeps happening? Things are changing so quickly that no one person can really know everything in their field. And I have a podcast, and I interviewed Catherine Lombardozzi, who wrote a book called Learning Environments. And she said that by the time, and she's also an instructor at a college, by the time you get through 4 years of schooling, what you learned in your freshman year may be outdated. That's a little bit of a scary thought. But how can we remain relevant? How can we keep people updated? Because a lot of times, you can't make courses fast enough to keep people updated with their skills. And the other big overwhelming fact is the quantity of information that we generate. We generate so much information as a planet that it used to be gigabytes and megabytes, and now it's petabytes, exabytes, zettabytes, and yottabytes. It's staggering. And one of the reasons for this is that processing power is cheap, so everybody's got a little computer in their pocket or purse. And also storage is cheap, so we can just keep generating and generating digital information, and it doesn't matter. By the way, If you ever hear the internet rumor that Yoda Bytes was named after Yoda, I checked it out. It's not true. I was pretty disappointed, and I'm sure you are too. Really, Yoda Bytes is a prefix that means 1,000 to the 8th power. So, bye Yoda. I thought it was so cool when I first heard that, but it was just a rumor. So one of the big drivers that's changing everything is we're always on. We always have a connection to the internet. Now maybe that just seems normal, but it used to be that you had to dial in on a modem. So it was a completely different thing. Now you just pull your phone out of your pocket and you're on. Or you just go to your computer and you're on. So we're always connected. That's made a big difference. And it's one of the things that allowed us to have this increase in software as a service, or SaaS. So now, because there are so many applications out there where people can just use the cloud, it's built up a lot of collaboration. A lot of people at work, at home, are collaborating with each other, and that's kind of changed the nature of work in a lot of ways. The rise of social media and collaboration tools has really changed things, because now it's, in just a second, you can put something out there to your Twitter followers and say, what tool is good to use for this? For example, when Google Reader went out of business, when they stopped having Google Reader, I just went to my network and said, what are some new RSS readers? What can I use? People gave me back 4 or 5 suggestions. I tried them out, and I used one of them, just like that, without even having to read an article. And also, the rapid adoption of mobile has changed things a lot. I don't think anyone expected there to be a couple billion mobile subscription services this quickly. So just to get some statistics straight, 87%, according to Pew, of American adults use the internet. This is a pretty recent statistic. 74% of internet users use social media. I was kind of surprised that that was so high. Let's look at some other drivers that have to do with the mind shifts. First of all, finally, it seems as though people in the world of training are realizing that one training event is not enough. Within about 1 day of a training event, people forget something like can forget up to 50% of what they learned. So that's kind of a shocking statistic. So we have to do something different, because one training event isn't enough. We have to find ways to continually work with people. Another big shocker was when the research came out that people learn informally, that up to 70% of what people learn in the workplace is learned through informal means. That's kind of shocking. Another was that learning is social. Now, this seems obvious, because you know what it's like when you see a child learning from his or her parents. They just learn from observation, from mimicking, from interacting with people. But then suddenly we got this idea in our field that you have to learn from courses. But really, when you're at work and you want to learn how to do something in a spreadsheet or in Word, you just go and ask the person next to you, right? So learning is very social. And one really fascinating outlook is that knowledge is really a connected network. And the philosophy or theory there is connectivism. And what this means is that what's more important than the knowledge in your mind is the network of people and information that you have access to. That knowledge is really embedded in that connected network. I find that fascinating and kind of true. Because networks are more agile than hierarchies. When you're in a hierarchical structure, you have to wait for the person at the top to make a decision, and then things float down. But in this new networked world, you can get information immediately from your network. It's really different. And finally, the cultural shifts. First of all, in the workplace, you can bring your own, there's a trend to bring your own device. in your workplaces, how often do you see people bringing in their own tablets or their own laptops? Okay. It's starting to grow. And people are often more productive on their own devices, and it kind of empowers people, especially in a small company, can empower people to be able to bring in their devices. And that could have a big effect on our future if everybody's bringing in their own computers or laptops or tablets. Also, getting rid of the top-down structure. That's kind of a trend that's been happening too. So that rather than having someone at the top making training decisions, people have access, people at the, quote, bottom, have access to all kinds of information. So a lot of times, what people are learning is going from the bottom up. That's another big trend that can affect us and our future. There's greater transparency now. Now that anyone can make a complaint on Twitter about their airline service or something that they bought, and the company will actually respond. Have you noticed that? They'll actually respond. So people kind of expect things to be more open in the workplace. They expect people to be transparent, and they expect things to be more open. They expect people to be able to share. A lot of people can't understand what's wrong with sharing knowledge. How can that be wrong? Because there are still some companies that have, policies in place where you're not allowed to use a social network. And finally, work flexibility affects our future. Work flexibility is the second most important attribute of the workplace after salary, because people want to be able to work at home if they need to. And this creates a very dispersed workforce, which is also going to affect our future. So I think if we look at all of these drivers in our culture, drivers in the research and education, and drivers in technology, I think we'd be short-sighted if we didn't realize that we need to overhaul it in some way. Does anybody else feel like we need an overhaul? Well, I'm hoping to convince you of this if you're not convinced yet. So let's see what we can conclude. Global connectivity allows for sharing of data, information, and knowledge around the world. So that's one fact. Workers can bypass learning and development because they now have other resources. They have other ways to get information. Because things change so quickly, no organization can hire all the knowledge workers it needs to cover every emerging need. It's just impossible. There's no one person who can know everything. Also, long training events can be disruptive to the workflow. People complain about that long training events take people away from their work. And another fact is that learning is a continuous process nowadays. It lasts a lifetime. You have to continually keep up with things. And this is a very interesting graph. It shows research done by Brandon Hall Research. It's the frequency of connection that people will need to learning resources. And their research showed, I think they interviewed 250 companies, and 60% of them said that people will need to connect to other resources either weekly or more frequently. So the 60% is the two numbers mixed up, combined. I don't know if you see that. So we have all these facts about how the world is changing. Yet if you're already a learning professional, most of us in the industry, most of the time, when someone comes to us with something, the only thing we can think about doing is creating courses. And in some ways, if we don't change that, we're going to become less and less relevant to the workplace. But don't despair. There are a lot of alternatives to creating courses. That's what we're going to talk about. So there's often a mismatch between how and what people need to learn and what we provide them with. People want to learn one way. Maybe they just want to pull out a 2-minute video on their phone. and we give them a 90-minute e-learning course. Or somebody wants to be able to have a small 20-minute session on how to do something, and we give them a one-day event. Because our industry is very course-centric rather than solution-centric. When you're course-centric, the solution to every problem is a training intervention. But when you're solution-centric, the solution to every problem may vary, and it may not even involve formal training. One thing I love about the training or the learning experience industry is how we kind of shine a flashlight on problems that are out there in the world. Have you ever been to a meeting, if you're in the training industry, where you say to someone something like, well, what's that policy? And that you want us to teach, and they go, oh, we don't have it written yet. Has that ever happened to you? Training just shows up all the flaws in the system. Or an IT person will come to you and say, people are not using the legacy time management system. Well, you look at it, and it's horrible. It needs an entirely new user interface. It doesn't work right. Training can't fix everything. Sometimes the solution is somewhere else. And because we are shining a flashlight on things, we can help other people do that. As soon as I got my instructional design degree and went to work, I was helping an entirely different section of the company with software user interface, just because I knew a little bit about cognitive psychology. It was just really common sense. A lot of people who work in instructional design don't realize that your skills are applicable to so many different fields. It's kind of shocking, because it's all based on how people learn and how people think. That was my pep talk, by the way. So yes, I think in the future that we will be creating courses. There's always going to be novices who really need an entire course. There's always going to be compliance courses where you've got someone legal looking down on you, and you have to make sure that everyone has done that, and you have to track it. So yes, there will probably always be courses. And what about someone who wants to change careers or wants to learn something completely new? But I hope that in the future, and I'm just as guilty as anyone else, that we can make our courses so modular that as people move through the layers and the levels of competence, that they can just kind of pop in there and take one little module, one little 10-minute, just like, anyone ever use lynda.com? You can go in there and get the information you need in 5 minutes, because it's so modularized. I hope that we can move to that kind of model. But then, after that, we owe it to the people who are at the mid-level and the experts to simply support learning. So I think this is going to be one of our big roles in the future. Just giving learning support. Now, probably some of you are doing that already, but I think we need to do more of it. The next thing we owe to the workforce, to the employees where we work, is to empower them, to give them the tools and skills they need to be self-directed learners. And finally, if you're really courageous, the world needs you to be a change agent. And people in our field can see a lot of things that are going wrong around the world. So these are the 3 roles that I would like to talk about. The roles of our future: support learning, empower the workforce, and be a change agent. So let's talk about supporting learning. In my mind, that means provide resources and assets needed to efficiently improve performance. There are a lot of ways that you can support learning, but here are 4 of them. One is to support learning in context. So you support it in the workplace, in the workflow, rather. Another is to use content curation. And if you're not familiar with that, I'm going to explain it. Mentoring and coaching is another way you can support people, or you can create programs that do that. And communities of practice is another way. And this diagram is in there. So by supporting in context, we're talking about job aids, mobile aids, getting people connected to social networks so they can ask each other quick questions. and creating learning portals. Those are kind of like websites with lots of resources and assets. Is anyone here making job aids or mobile aids? Yeah, that's great. So you already know about supporting learning. I think that we're going to get to do more of this in the future because people don't have time to take courses. I just wanted to point out that there's something great about those old-fashioned printed job aids. They really go a long way. And everyone is so high-tech, we can't forget about these low-tech solutions. They're not that expensive to create. People can keep them on their desk or in their work area and wherever they are. So I wanted to put in a plug for job aids. Here's my instructional design guru app. This is an example of performance support. An instructional designer needs to look at, it's working with people, it's unsure what a term means. You can just look it up right in the workflow. Here's another example of a mobile performance support app. This is for people who work in heating and ventilation and air conditioning. It's a way to calculate duct sizes very quickly. Not duck, but duct. Here's another mobile app, performance support app for bartenders. It's called iBartender. Don't know how to make a drink? Pull it out of your pocket and look it up. All of this kind of support is happening in the workflow. That's what learning in context means. Now I want to show you something that one of your peers created. Are you familiar with Jane Bozarth? She's written a lot of books, and she's got some fans out there. Well, she's the head of, she's the e-learning coordinator for the state of North Carolina's HR management group. So she has a lot going on. And they hire a lot of people, and she wanted to come up with something that would help the onboarding process from the start. And it's such a cool, simple approach. I loved it. So she went to Pinterest. Can you see that well enough? Yep, your first day. And she tells people in the upper left, this is what the building looks like. The next photo of a woman is, this is Vanessa. She's going to give you your parking pass. She shows what the lobby and waiting area looks like, what the hallways look like. She shows the director that they'll be meeting with on their first day. And she makes sure she shows them where they can get a snack and where the restrooms are. Now, if you know what it's like when you're starting work on the first day, it's pretty stressful. This could really relieve a lot of the stress. It's just a very friendly way to onboard. And it's not even private, because who cares if anyone sees this? It doesn't even matter. So she just did it on Pinterest. It's a great way to give someone support. Now let's talk a little bit about curation, because you might not be familiar with it. Curation always reminds me of an art gallery. The curator of an art gallery has to find paintings. In our case, we can help people find content that's related to their work. We can get experts to do that for their departments. After you find the content, you have to filter it, because not everything is relevant. Then you organize it. Some of the tools allow you to organize your content, and then you annotate it. You give a little summary so someone will know whether they want to look at it or not, want to read it, and you put it in some kind of context. The advantages of content curation are that it provides meaning to all the disorganized and overwhelming information that just hits us all day long in our field. And it picks up where search engines leave off, because you know how frustrating it is when you get a nice big long list of results and none of them are relevant? It's very frustrating. And it has the potential for building community, because if you start a curation program for a particular department, you can allow everyone to curate. And it tends to build community and a feeling of camaraderie between people. And people who are virtually connected can do that on opposite sides of the planet. Here's an example of Scoop.it, and it's a site that someone is curating on mobile learning. And here's an example of Zeef, Z-E-E-F, and this shows a real organized version. This man, Robin Good, lives in Italy, and I have a link to a podcast interview that I did with him on curation. He's fascinating. And these are all the curation tools that he knows about. He organized them into different groups. So this is another way that you can curate, just the tools with no annotation. But they're organized very nicely. That's where our instructional design skills, if you do have those, come in so handy. We really know how to organize information, which is part of information design. Okay, mentoring and coaching, I think we kind of all know what that is. We don't have to do all of this at our workplaces. What we have to do is start a program or ask someone else to start a program. If we see there's a need for mentoring and coaching, we can implement that. And finally, COPs, or communities of practice. I am so guilty of acronyms. I tried not to use too many, but you don't have that much space on a slide. So a community of practice is a group that shares an interest or problem and learns through regular interactions. Anyone here know Craig Wiggins? He lives in Alexandria, okay? Well, Craig works for Advanced Distributed Learning. And they're the people who support the US Army's distance learning operation. And they're the people who came up with the SCORM standard. And how many people here are familiar with SCORM from e-learning? Oh, okay. I'm talking to the choir. And also, now they've come up with that new standard called XAPI, or the Experience API, which is supposed to be a lot better than SCORM. And it allows you to collect all kinds of data on people without being in a learning management system. So Craig's job is to build a community around XAPI. His job is to get people talking to each other. There are vendors, there are designers, there are e-learning people. Everyone's trying to figure it out. And his job is to get out there in the big wide world and connect people and to interact and to explain things. So he does things like goes on to Google Groups and answers questions. And he's behind a lot of events for XAPI. In fact, this one, Hyperdrive, is going on right now at DevLearn in Las Vegas. And I asked Greg, I said, that's great, but I interviewed him for this presentation, and I said, what would you recommend for people who want to start a community of practice in their own companies or organizations? And he said, you have to have an overarching purpose, problem, or goal. You need to have a digital framework for the activities that occur, and the platform has to be easy to use or people won't use it. And he said, expect distributed conversations. At first, you might be disappointed that everybody isn't conversing as a group, but he said that's just not natural. People will have little dispersed conversations, and that's how they're going to learn. And by the way, I have all these slides for you in a PDF file. I forgot to mention that, in case you're writing like crazy. Sorry. My bad, my bad. The link in your handout has the handouts with embedded links and the slides. Because we don't want to print all those slides. There's no reason to. Okay. Don't you feel more relaxed now? So just as a review, because we've been talking about a lot of things. Actually, I've been talking about a lot of things. Just some ways that you can support learning are to support it in context, content curation, setting up mentoring and coaching programs, and setting up communities of practice or helping others set up communities of practice, because you can't do it all. But you can give people the idea and help somebody get started, push them on their way. So now we're going to do an exercise with your table. So please turn to page 3, I believe it is. And that's just where you can jot down some notes. I'd like you to collaborate with the people at your table to solve one of these problems. There are 3 problems listed there, without creating a formal traditional course. So come up with a way that you can solve one of these problems without creating a traditional formal course. You don't actually have to solve the problem, just come up with a way that you could solve the problem. So choose one. Can you read them? Okay. Do we have a microphone? Oh yeah, there we go. Can I just say I love people in this profession? As soon as you give them a problem, they just solve it. So who wants to go up to the mic and just tell the solution that you came up with? We have time for like 2 or 3 tables to do that. Anybody want to go up? We're all friends, more or less. All right, here we go. We've got two volunteers. Perfect. Go ahead.
1, 2. For our table here, I'm the only gentleman there, so I was voted to speak. We came up with a solution for number 1.
Okay.
And we combine a couple of things. We want to focus on the problem by using bit strips and creating a jingle.
Okay, can you explain that a little bit more?
The problem with new hires not being able to write professional emails, we thought about using bit strips, which is a app that you can do in a cartoon way that we don't offend anybody, and then we would add a jingle so that we can remind them to maybe read out loud their emails before they send them out.
That is so cool. I never even heard of bit strips. I'm sorry. I can't know everything. That's why I'm here networking. Excellent. Thank you. Love that.
What my table did is in quantity, maybe not quality. We started slow with things like job aids and coaching and mentoring, and then we started rolling.
Now, which solution are you trying?
We were doing number 1.
Oh, number 1. Okay, that's a popular one.
We had to have a vote at the table using
Okay.
our fingers. So we then said, well, what about videos and showing people how to do it with videos? And then we said, why not do a client video? And I'm going to call that a non-testimonial from the client in that particular case. Tell them what the impact is of this poor email.
Okay.
One-on-one chats, reviews, blind carbon copies to the boss, having a email buddy that's a representative, write the best sentence based on a bad sentence, what's wrong with this email, and have prizes for these things, and expectation sessions with the manager. So.
Excellent. Look
There
at
we
all
go.
those solutions. Yes, excellent. Thank you so much. I love telling people that you're going to blind copy the boss with every one of your emails. Yeah. Oh, we have some more people who want to volunteer. Come on. Let's hear.
We had 2. So,
Well, you know what, I'll take the HIPAA and you.
I'll take number 2. Okay, well, we'll go in order. We did number 2 and 3. I'm going to do 2.
Number 2 and 3. Okay.
The warehouse one, we kind of did a combination, or decided on a combination of the Pinterest.
Can you
and
move a little
job aid.
closer to the mic?
We
Thanks.
decided to do a combination of the Pinterest and the job aid for number 2, and kind of go for shock value, where if you didn't follow the safety tip, this is what happened. You know, your arm would get cut off, whatever, and have little. I mean.
Okay, not so close.
Just as the gentleman at our table, and I'm sorry I forgot his name, was saying that he worked with first responders, and you really have to get their attention. So, and to make it pictorial so it hits them right away, they don't have a lot of reading. Maybe have a little bubble and captions of what not to do and what happens if you do this, this, and this, but then combine that with maybe, in a little corner, the job aid that had the succinct steps of what process to actually follow. But the first thing you want to hit them with is, to me, what is a whiff is if you don't follow this, this is what happens, because that's what you're most concerned with, not following the process, more as avoiding the penalty.
Avoiding injury.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great one. And can you tell us about number 3? Thank you so much. Those were great. Great suggestions. Yeah.
So I have to just share, I was sitting here watching you, and I turned around when you put us on this assignment and realized that I was sitting next to someone I worked with 10 years ago.
That's great.
So, I don't know that we came up with a great idea for HIPAA so much as it was a very interesting problem. And in fact, if I'm right, we have some CMMS folks at my table who actually dealt with this issue. And one of the complexities that we were talking about was it's not just the procedure, but it's sort of an underlying contextual sensitivity to the fact that, for example, it's a behavior. You can't speak loudly about somebody's medical condition, things like that, in addition to which actual discrete piece of information you can give out at which time. So we had basically a job aid, right? Basically the form with HIPAA with thumbs up and thumbs down for what would be allowed.
Okay, great. Thumbs up, thumbs down, job aid. Excellent. Thank you so much. There was one more person who wanted to look at that. We'll have time for one more person. Thank you, both of you.
We also worked on number 3, partially because Kathy has just completed what was a very difficult and arduous training associated with HIPAA, but also because it didn't necessarily fit the model of what we just talked about. You couldn't create a community group who could just kind of come up with their own ideas. This is legal. As they've mentioned, you have to make sure that what you're communicating is accurate.
Right.
We thought about a job aid, very simple, yes, no. We thought about putting it up as a screensaver on everybody's computers so they would have repeated access to it and it would kind of be in their face. But then we also thought about creating a mobile app where they could ask significantly more complex questions, and those would go to legal staff, and then those would become later embedded into a database so that information would grow over time. The information is curated, but it's curated according to the policies and the rules.
Oh, that is such a good idea. I love it. Thank you. All right. Well, hopefully this little exercise will help us, all of us, just think a little bit more broadly. Of course, then it means you have to convince the sponsors or the clients that this is worthwhile. But this is the first step. So thank you, everyone. Let's talk now about empowering the workforce. This is something that you really owe to everyone at your organization. You provide them with the tools and skills that enable self-directed learning, content generation, and sharing. Because people at work can also generate their own content. So here are 4 ways that you can do this. One is to help people build a personal learning environment and help them create a personal learning network. Now, you might already have these things, but perhaps you don't call them by this name. Another approach is to enable collaboration, such as with some of the tools that are out there that allow collaboration. And also this kind of cool concept that's growing in popularity now called showing your work. And we'll get into that in a minute. So a personal learning environment is a network of services and tools that are necessary for ongoing learning controlled by the individual, and that's the key point. A personal learning environment is controlled by the individual. And a personal learning network is the same thing, except rather than it being the tools, it's the people that you are connected with. You don't have to know these people. You can just follow them online in Twitter, Facebook, and other ways because you think that they might have interesting things to say. You might read their blog. So this is all part of your personal learning network and your personal learning environment. How many people here would you say, raise your hand if you feel like you do have a personal learning environment? You have certain tools that you use for learning. Okay. I wanted to tell you about Mike Taylor, who has really delved into this personal learning environment thing and has been helping other people with it. For 2 years now, every summer, he has something called Summer Learn Camp. It all started out, Mike is now a community manager at Articulate, which makes e-learning software. But before that, prior to that, he worked for a power company, and he just used to put out tech tips once a week to get people who, to just to teach people and to help them come up to speed, because he noticed that there are a lot of people in his power company that really didn't know some of the basic tools. And his once-a-week email tech tips started to become so popular that everyone wanted to subscribe to them. And when he left the company, people said, please keep sending me your emails. So he set up a blog with tech tips. And then he came up with the great idea, actually following someone else's model, to create a summer learn camp. So it starts in June or July. You can sign up. There's no commitment or requirement. And it's 12 weeks with about a 20-minute lesson and a short activity that you can do, and it helps you learn all the tools. It sounds a little bit like a course at UMBC that I heard someone complaining about. Except this is all on your own. So here's an example. Lesson number 20 was personal knowledge management. And all the lessons are still up there, but if you do them when the camp starts, you can comment and discuss things. And it's just set up on a blog when you write your comments below. And then the learning part continues, and then there's an activity. And that's all it takes. So I asked Mike, I interviewed him for this, and I asked him how many people, how did it go? How many people drop out? So he said it goes really strong at first, and then in the first year, when they came to blogging, people just dropped out like crazy. So the second year, he took out blogging. Blogging is no longer part of the course, and the second time he's done it, it's been even more successful. And here's the interesting thing. All he did was organize the information, and he's using 100% curated content that's out there, and he was able to create a whole course with curated content. There's so much information out there. So I just thought this was a great idea. I just wanted to show you an example of the kinds of tools that could be in your personal learning environment. Just wanted to give you a second to just glance over that, and you can get this from the slides. These are all the things that can be part of your personal learning environment. Now I want to tell you about something that Trina Rimmer did. Anyone here know Trina? She lives in Florida? Yeah, okay. Trina's a consultant in the learning field, e-learning. She designs and develops e-learning, and maybe does other kinds of learning experience design. And here's the way that she figured out to empower people. A client came to her and said, we have all these tools and professional development approaches, but no one is using them. So in this case, it wasn't that there were external tools. These were internal tools for professional development at a particular company. No one was using them because the company had been bought and sold 8 times, or several times in 8 years. Maybe that was the story. So people were all confused and weren't sure about the tools and didn't even know about them. So rather than creating a course, she created a career expedition. And she worked with an illustrator. She had these designs. You know how you can storyboard it, and then you can work with an illustrator or a graphic designer to really make it nice. So the illustrator made all these screens. You choose your marker when you start the career expedition, and the marker is what your role is. You choose what you want your role to be, and then you go through this process of decision making, and you get badges. And here's what the career expedition main screen looks like. So this is a kind of a cool approach to help people learn about the professional development in their company, to help people use their tools. And it wasn't a course. It was just a way to empower people to get good at their own professional development rather than have a manager tell them what to do. So that's another example I wanted to show you. Back to a third way that you can enable your workforce is through collaboration tools. And those are easy to come by. There's Google Documents. Now Microsoft has 365. There's LearnCamp not LearnCamp, that's what we just did. There's Basecamp for project management. There are many, many collaboration tools. And you can empower your workforce by just teaching people how to use these tools or getting someone else to teach the people how to use these tools. And when people collaborate, they get smarter and more efficient, and they actually save a company money. And finally, this is what enabled collaboration is. When 2 or more people work together to share ideas and accomplish a goal. Now, showing your work is getting big in our field. Jane Bozarth just wrote a book called Show Your Work. It captures tacit knowledge and it improves efficiency. So there are a lot of times at work when you can see how someone does something on the outside, but you don't really know what their process is. And it's almost like a mystery when someone's an expert at something. So in Show Your Work, The whole philosophy is you either narrate your work or you explain how you do every little thing. And if you're interested in any of the articulate products, you can go to screener.com. And there you can find all kinds of short screen capture videos of how people have done something. And there are probably some other tutorials there too. In this case, Kevin Thorne, who's a illustrator and a e-learning designer and developer, he tells how he made this fantastic course, this award-winning course called Mission Turfgrass in Articulate Presenter. And it's pretty impressive, and he talks about how he did that. I wrote an article recently to show my work where I showed the kind of poor quality storyboards that I made, gave them to an illustrator, and he turned them into this. I thought people would be interested in that, and I hired him from Elance. So I wrote a whole story about that. So it's really great when we can share how do we go about doing something. And there's no reason to be embarrassed, you know. I know my storyboard looked crappy, but it doesn't matter. All I had to do was communicate a concept to someone. And I wanted to show everyone this is what your storyboards can look like too. In Jane's book, Show Your Work, she writes about an example of a surgeon who's using Google Glass to teach medical students while he's performing an operation. Because you know the whole thing about being in a stadium and you're up here and you can't really see what's going on? With Google Glass, the medical students can see exactly what's taking place in the surgery. I did wonder how much I would like someone narrating during my surgery. I wasn't sure about that. But it's great for the med students. So just as a review, ways that you can empower the workforce are by building and teaching them how to use a personal learning environment, helping them connect with people, helping them find people who are experts in their field so they can create a personal learning network, enabling collaboration with tools, and turning people on to showing your work and narrating your work. You know, it doesn't have to be public. It can all be within the confines of your company or organization. And now I wanted everyone to turn to page 5 on your handout. It's about personal learning environments. And just write down a few, maybe 3 or 4 tools that you use to learn for your own personal learning. And share them with your table, and your table might have some suggestions of some other tools. Just take a few minutes to do that. If you get any good ideas, make sure you write them down. So on page 5. Oh, great. Don't zoom too much. Okay, everybody. Raise your hand if you learned about a few new tools. Anybody learn about something new that they can use? You know what's really fun? You can go to the internet and, because it's always on, and enter personal learning environment and look at the images, and you'll see there's quite a few people who have mind mapped their personal learning environments, and I find it fascinating. They organize it by social bookmarking and curation, and or all kinds of different ways. It's really fascinating. I thought I was going to make one for this presentation, but it takes so long if you're using a lot of different tools. But did you learn something new from your people at your table? Did you get some good ideas? Can I see your list later? Okay, that's great. Well, we're going to go on to the final role that I think we will be playing in the future is to be a change agent. And you know, if you're just starting out in this career, it's not that easy to be a change agent, right? It's not like you're sitting at the top and you can command everyone, you know, to change things. But there are little subtle ways that you can do it, and you have to be happy with the small wins. But let me define what a change agent is. A change agent is someone who demonstrates leadership and vision to help employees and the organization achieve positive transformations. Kind of flowery, huh? But there are definitely ways that you can be a change agent no matter where you are in the company. First of all, you have to have some kind of transformative vision. You have to see things are one way, and ultimately, I'd like them to be this way. There are some better ways to do things. I can see it, even if you are not in the position to completely change it. You need to be someone who can break down silos, and that's not very hard to do. It involves getting to know and talking to people in different departments. And then when you see some connections, hey, how about we have a lunch about this? How about we invite some people from this department and this department and that department, see if we can solve this problem together. Or just even chatting with people from other departments. I know I used to run a training group, and one time I said something to one of the artists, and he said to me, well, I don't know, I've never seen my work finished. I've never seen my work in an e-learning course. He worked as an artist, as a graphic designer, and he never saw the finished products. And I had no idea that was true. Sorry. There I go. Techie person? I don't see the clip, guys. Sorry. Oh, I didn't think of that. It is. I just don't know how to get it in. I swear it's something very tricky. I'll just hold it for a minute until somebody has mercy on me and comes and gets me. The other thing that a change agent can do is connect people to each other, just as I was saying before. You connect people to each other by breaking down silos. Did you ever meet people who were connectors? They just get joy out of saying, oh, so-and-so can help you over here. Oh, somebody can help you over there. Oh, I'm getting... This is why I dropped it, because I wanted attention. Here it is. Do you know how to put it in? And finally, the final way that you can be a change agent. Ooh, you're so smart. Thank you. Is to make sure that learning and development is relevant to your organization. We have to go out of our way to maintain and to stay relevant. Where's that noise coming from? Oh, crazy. I wanted to tell you about someone that I think has really worked well as a change agent. His name is Mark Britz. He's a peer of ours. He told me that he creates courses as a last resort. What a mentality that is. He creates courses as a last resort. So let me tell you what he has two stories actually. He worked for a dental health company and they had offices in 20 states. And there was a training program for new office managers who also did sales. And these new office managers had to go through 10 weeks of training. 7 weeks were on site, and 3 weeks were mixed in the classroom. And the morale was so low, and the attrition was so high. And when the people were out there in the field, they barely got any support. And the whole thing was just a big failure. They couldn't keep people in the program. So Mark came on board, and he noticed they have SharePoint, and he noticed that they weren't leveraging SharePoint's social tools. He said they're very primitive, but it doesn't matter. So we set up a blog for every single person who was out there, every new manager. And people would start to write about their daily experiences and connect with each other. And people would comment on their blogs. Of course, it was all private and within the organization. And he said the hardest part was getting the trainers to not jump in and answer the questions. Let the people build the community and start answering each other's questions. And he said it was so easy to use the tool. All it was a big rectangle. He said, you put a rectangle in front of people, they know how to use it. So people started blogging in a created community, and the attrition rate was reduced. Also, it allowed the trainers to find out who was really in trouble, and they could call these people and talk them through things. So this was a great solution. All he had to do was allow people to share experiences and ask questions using simple social tools. Does anybody hear a little breeze going on there? I'm not sure what that is. Maybe the air conditioning? I'll try to fix that. Okay, then Mark went to another company. It was a health IT company. They had 32 courses, very modularized, that already existed. And they said to him, we need to create a university and create more and more courses. And you know his philosophy, create courses as a last resort. And he said, you've only got 450 people here, and they're all experts. Why do we need to create a university? What we need to do is connect experts with each other and connect them with content. And that's what he's in the process of doing right now. They have an enterprise learning management system with social tools, and he's trying to get people to connect with each other because one expert can ask another expert. And he's got these, and if they need to learn something quickly, they can go into one of those 32 courses and pick out a module. So he's been doing this whole thing without creating a course. So I asked him how it's working. And he said, fair. And here's the problem. The tool is not part of the workflow, and he wants to find some way to integrate it into the workflow so that it's extremely easy for people to learn how to use it, and they'll just be willing to use it. And he said one other thing. He said the tool that they're using is not that great. So as a way to teach it to people, he gathers people together, whoever wants to come, just once a week for 20 minutes and teaches them a little bit about how to use the tool. He then records it, and the video just floats around to different people who need to learn the tool. Again, not exactly a course, just a little 20-minute tutorial and conversation with people. So I would call him a change agent, because he gets in there, looks at the problem, and tries to find a workable solution. So these are the 4 things that I think might be part of our role in the future. Having a transformative vision, breaking down silos, connecting people to each other, and ultimately making learning and development very relevant for all of the future needs. So let's talk about what skills you might need in the future. Certainly instructional design skills really come in handy, because we know how to analyze a problem or a situation. There's nothing in instructional design that says the answer has to be a course. So we might be able to find the gap and create learning support, performance support. Another thing is we really need good people skills. And I'm guessing most of you already have that. We need good people skills because we have to be able to talk to people, find out what they need. We need to be able to bring people together and be connectors. We need to be able to talk to higher ups and explain to them what crazy things we're doing. We need to know the tools. I often have people say to me, I'm not technical. I don't think we can say that anymore. We need to at least know some of the tools that will solve the problem. You don't even have to be an expert in the tools, but you need to know what's out there. Like I just learned about Bitstrip today. I'm pretty excited. Sorry for the acronym, but the long word version wouldn't fit. What I'm thinking is it's really good to know a little bit about information architecture, which is what people learn when they're building websites, and user interface design. Because before you know it, you might be needing to design a learning portal with resources. And it will information architecture has all of these tools, and user experience design. They have these tools that are great for instructional designers to use. And user interface design might come in handy when you're designing a mobile app or a website. So those are two things that would be good to get a little bit more cross-disciplinary. A couple people told me, when I asked them what skills they thought we would need in the future, they told me business acumen. Because whatever you're doing, even if you're working for a nonprofit, they still need to stay alive too. So whatever you're doing, you have to make sure that what your goals are aligned with the company or organization's goals. So you need to understand how they make money, what the competitors are doing, if there are competitors. What things help them make more money, what things, are a drain. You have to build your own personal learning environment and personal learning network, because how else can you tell others how to do it? That's something that people can start on right away, making their horizon broader. Design thinking. How many people have heard of design thinking? Design thinking, that's great. Design thinking is a very humanistic approach to solving problems. You really dive into what people are thinking and feeling and needing in their experience, and you work through them. I think we would all, instructional designers need to know, and training professionals need to know design thinking. You need to know marketing skills, because oftentimes you're the one who has to go out there and promote something. It's amazing what all the things that we need to know in our field. It really is. But marketing skills will really come in handy. So study a little bit about that. And you have to know how to evaluate programs. And that's one place where we're kind of lacking. We don't get very good feedback. I put out an e-learning course, and I don't know what's going on a lot of times. So we need to be able to evaluate our programs so we know what's working and what isn't, and tweak it and change it. Can anybody think of any other skills? Anything else come to mind? This is a pretty big universe of skills. Yeah,
Contracts.
how to do contracts. That might come under business acumen, but maybe not. Yeah, that's great. Anyone else? Yeah.
Under business acumen, political acumen.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Politics plays such a big part in getting things done. Yep, great, thank you. So are there obstacles to creating the kind of future role as learning professionals? How many people think there are? The first thing I think that you might run into are the typical fears. People will have fear of something new. People are scared that something horrible is going to go public. And the thing is, there are all these enterprise tools that are within the organization, that are behind the firewall. So you can kind of calm people down about that. You know, you can create a private Facebook group to have a discussion after a course. But also, there are enterprise tools where you can have it all behind the firewall. And also, as far as trying something new, a lot of people recommend when they want to do something a little bit radical in their company, a lot of people recommend starting with a very small group of evangelists who create a lot of buzz, and they say how cool it is, and they start to love it, and things can spread that way. A really common fear is managers feeling like they're going to lose control. They're not going to be able to say what every person should learn. But the truth is, people are looking things up and learning what they want to learn and what they need to learn in the moment all the time anyway. So I think you have to build a case for it. Try a few things out and build a case. Do some research and find out how people are saving money by allowing social networking within a company and collaboration. It's saving those high-performing companies who are using it a lot of money. And then finally, you might create a whole program and have a lack of participation. And that's another case where people say, try to get some evangelists, the people who you always see on their phone and who are always on Facebook and always on Twitter. Try to get them to get involved, because that way it can be a success and then hopefully it will spread. Peter Morville, who is a pioneer in information architecture, said there's never been a better time to be an architect of understanding. And I think that is completely true for learning professionals too. It is so exciting now. There are so many crazy options. It's almost overwhelming. There are so many different things that we can do, but it's so exciting. We have to think in terms of change and overhaul. So we have to solve problems, not just build courses. That'll be part of our future role. I think we have to develop skills for the future. Keep learning. And ideally, everyone here will go back and try, even if it's just a little bit and a small win, to instigate change. Thank you. Has anyone here been holding back a comment? Is there something you wanted to say? Yes.
Yeah, something that what's occurred to me, if you strip away the technology, I'll go through that.
Great. Okay, great.
First of all, I think you did an excellent presentation and covered a lot of territory people need to hear. But if you strip away the technology, if you strip away all of the newness of what we do, it's really Socratic teaching, asking questions to get answers. Forming groups, for instance, anybody who was studying, say, religious scripture, they get together in groups and discuss, even before there was printing. And so what we're doing is really not new. We're actually going backwards to the basics of human learning, but now we superimpose technology on it as delivery. But if you're looking at, say, Marshall McLuhan, medium is the message, I mean, that maybe was before its time. But I think what we're really doing here is not inventing something new. We're actually going back and rethinking about what how we got where we are right now.
I think
Okay.
you have a point there, because when you're a child, learning is completely social, and we're going back to our roots in certain ways. It's true. Good point. Yeah.
Because I don't know if the two people who just spoke,
What's
the two people, stood high. The two people who spoke are from Florida State, and Florida State is number 2. It's kind of ironic. Is that not funny? Listen, I want to say thank you for the excellent presentation.
Thank
I
you.
also want to thank Greg for the yummy food, although I did not eat it. It looks delicious.
he cooked it himself.
I know. It looks delicious.
So he's amazing. He's really.
I came late, halfway into your presentation. The first question that popped into my head was you were talking about different research about learning, which was really fascinating. And I had a question which has nothing to do with your presentation, but it just popped in my head, which is, I was thinking about emotion, 2 emotions, okay? One is, more like an emotion of pain and luxury. So if learning is more like, if we have to provide luxury or some kind of, pleasure or pain, I was curious if research shows which one induces more learning. Thank you.
And I kind of have seen some research about that. It seems like it's gone both ways. For instance, they'll say if you those videos that they'll show high school students where they to get them to drive safely, where they'll show a horrible accident, a gory accident, and they'll show it to high school students. And there's been some debate about whether painful learning or emotionally painful learning is better, or whether it's better to gloss over that and just try to, rather than fear-based, just to try to appeal to someone's higher instincts. And I think I've seen a mix of results. Greg, do you have an answer for that? He's just sitting back there, man. So I'm sorry. Where I've seen the research has to do with public health information. And so maybe you can look into that, because in a lot of public health information, they'll try to scare people to stop smoking or plead with them to their higher instincts. And so that might be a place where you can start researching it. All right. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Speak to that point for a second.
Sure.
And
Right.
I used to work for a major charity, and we made their films, their campaign films. The feedback on the films was that people really didn't enjoy being made to cry in order to, learn about the program and get them to give, and that they really would prefer that they get information that, appealed to them intellectually. And so we changed how we did things and did what people said they wanted.
Design thinking.
And yeah, however, the contributions went way down.
Wow.
Yeah.
People are so complex. That's amazing. Thank you for that story. Go ahead. You're next. I'm sorry about that.
I had a comment on the gentleman's comment, although I also agree about this learning opportunity, because I'm also a physician, and they say, like, if a patient's a smoker and he comes in with lung cancer, you have a teaching and learning opportunity there to teach them about smoking. But about the comment that we're sort of going back to the past, that we're learning in groups, but we did that before, and the technology is another platform. When we were talking about your HIPAA learning problem in our group earlier, one of the ideas was that so a person's maybe online accessing electronic health record, the system can be observing that maybe they're going down a path they oughtn't to go, and then the system could warn the individual that, according to HIPAA regulations, you might be going down the wrong path. And the point of the example is that I think there's a new opportunity. If you use a computerized information system, and you have like whatever you want to call it, an intelligent agent, a tutor, intelligent tutoring, and so it interacts with the individuals, and you can do things more than just have a medium. And I think there are new opportunities. I mean, I realize you realize that, but But I just wanted to point out.
Oh, okay, there are opportunities where you can embed that kind of thing right in software. Well, a long time ago, there were electronic performance support systems where people could at least quickly go get help. But what you're talking about is kind of an intelligent agent. I think that's a good thing to bring out, yeah. That would be fun to work on something like that.
Well, I agree with much of what you've said. I guess my problem is that I do a lot of government contracts and nonprofits, and there's a real pressure for easy metrics and evaluations. We did X number of training to X number of people for X many hours. How do you provide a good evaluation for this kind of learning that will help you with your
Did anyone hear that? She's working for the government, and you have to, you know, they want easy metrics. Well, one of the problems is simply that we're not giving any continuity of learning. So even if you give them the easy metrics, you create other ways. You do that plus performance support, plus social, so that people, you know, all you have to do is show them the forgetting curve, which I know it depends on what course it is and who the people are. But that kind of thing, you know, shows that the fire hose approach doesn't work. So the people need continuous learning. I think you might be able to squeeze that in there with the government. You know, one of the most compelling things I will tell clients is that people can only process 4 bits of information at one time. That's all they can do. They're not going to remember a fire hose. Now, it's true, some of my clients don't care because they just want it checked off, just like you were saying. They just don't even care. And that's a sad situation, to not even care, to spend all that time and money and not even care. So sometimes, you know, I do a little bit of scolding. What? Blah, 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 blah. But when you think that people can only process approximately 4 bits of information at one time, you really have to slow things down, give people repetition, give people lots of opportunities to practice. And that convinces more people than anything else, for me. Does anyone else have anything to say? Yeah.
We were just wondering about your 4 bits of information.
Yeah?
Is that for modules? Is that for 4 pieces at once?
No, like if you present somebody with, I mean, it depends what a bit is, it's true. I was hoping no one would ask me this. But I'm just joking. 4 pieces of information. After that, it just gets lost. Before I really understood, you know, how porous working memory was, I used to feel horrible that, like, let's say that you have to rehearse a phone number over and over again to remember it until you get it in your phone. You know, I used to feel bad that I had to do that. And then when I found out we can only do 4 or 5 bits of information, that whole thing about 7 plus or minus 2 is just a myth. I mean, you can go follow this crazy path of how it became fact. It's just not a fact if you do the research. So 4 pieces of information, if you just give people 7 pieces of information, they're just not going to remember it all at one time. They're just not going to remember it. Yep, I mean, it's just the way we are. And maybe it's gotten lower. That's the other thing. Because, no, seriously. Because of our short attention, you know, they say our attention spans are shorter. I'm not sure if that's true or not. What do you think, Greg? You think they are? Okay. Anyone else? It has been a joy to be with you tonight. Thank you so much.